Hello, I'm Neil Thind of Arun Associates, and this is Nick Huband of William J. Marshall, Structural Engineers and Architects. And this is the seventh of our video presentations, joint video presentations. And in this particular presentation, I wanted to look at a very unique situation where a neighbour wants to build right up, the building owner, the one carrying out the work, wants to build up right up to the neighbour's property. So if I draw the boundary between the two neighbours' properties to begin with as a red dashed line. So that's the boundary. And the actual neighbour, who's the adjoining owner, already has an extension wall. So you're looking at this at section right now. So just to explain. So they have a wall that pretty much goes right up to the boundary. So that's the neighbour's wall. Now that will sit on its own foundation. And that foundation is what is called concentrically loaded. So it basically sits to the centre of the side extension wall and protrudes to the neighbour's side of their property, so on their land. Now the next door neighbour, who now is the building owner, wants to build their extension, and they want to build it right up to the boundary line, close to the neighbour's extension already. So they want to build right here with their new wall coming down, and let's say that's their new wall coming down here. Okay, so what we have is this new wall here. So we have adjoining owner and we have building owner. So what we have there is now that wall will be sitting on its own foundation, and we have a potential clash of foundation here.
Yes.
So I'd appreciate if you can explain some of the engineering aspects and principles that need to be considered to overcome the problem, Nick, on that.
Firstly, this foundation projects onto the building owner's site, and we have the permission under the Act to remove this foundation to allow us to construct any works. So we remove the foundation.
Yeah.
The difficulty is now that the load that Neil was talking about being concentric is now eccentric. And what that does is that generates pressures under the soil, quite high pressures underneath this point. So park that idea, we need to deal with that in a moment. We come along now, our new foundations, working on the principle they're going to be to the same sort of depth as the neighbours, about 1 metre, 1200 below ground level perhaps, normal construction. We now need to construct our new foundation, which is going to be slightly eccentric too. The difficulty is, what do we do about the neighbour here? And frankly, the easiest solution is to underpin. Now one thing you could do is if you underpinned and continued over to here, what you would do then is you would have a concentric foundation for both. You'd have a single combined foundation at the bottom.
Yeah.
So underpin the neighbours and use this. I'm not drawing it very well. These two should be about the same width, like that.
Okay, yes, I understand. Yeah.
So
So you're underpinning both foundations there, basically. Yeah.
Well, in fact, to be fair, what the sequence you do it is you dig down to the right foundation depth. You then underpin along here, leaving your little toe kicked out the bottom,
Right.
and then you come along and put your new foundation on top of that.
Yes.
So you've got a combined foundation, and you've been able to get as close as practicable to there. It is all good practice to put a little bit of cork pack or some flexible material between the two, just in case there's any slight movements or you want to separate them in the future, but not a great problem. That's the first solution. Now, sometimes there can be issues with the neighbour. It can be considered quite expensive, and there is a second option available, which perhaps I could demonstrate.
Yeah, sure, by all means, Nick, go ahead. Yeah.
So we'll remove now our underpinning. Here's our joint owner's foundations. Assuming the ground level, the finished floor level of the new extension is about here, what we can do is we can put a cantilever slab. We will use the slab of the new ground floor as a cantilever to carry the wall at the edge. Normally, in most circumstances, perhaps won't be a full cavity wall, it'll perhaps be a line wall or something like that, because you've got the adjoining owner's wall next to you. So it shouldn't be too heavy, and you put back here a strip foundation to the same depth as this. So now you avoid the need to undermine adjoining owner's foundations, you avoid the need to cut away his foundations and the vibration and everything that would ensue. All you do here is put a little bit of flexible material here to ensure that this section does not bind on the adjoining owner's foundations. Now this becomes a question of cost, frankly.
Yes.
Whether this solution, which is reinforced at the top and inertial reinforcement at the bottom there, whether this will actually prove to be a cheaper solution, taking everything into consideration. The time taken to underpin the adjoining owner's foundations, which, as we discussed in the previous session, will be in metre sections, so that can take a while. So this is a question for the building owner and his or her advisors to consider as to which is the possible solution. But this is another way of skinning the cat.
And there might be resistance from the adjoining owner because they don't want their property underpinned. So that's also the consideration that we need to have in mind.
Yes.
But as a party wall surveyor, what I would say is that there is a limitation to the level that we can actually alter a designer's suggestions. Yes, they present a design to us, and we see the design, and then we'll say to them, look, do you have any alternative solutions? We can suggest it to them, right, but we can't enforce that.
Oh no, this will always be the building owner's choice.
It will be the building owner's choice. So if the building owner is insistent, look, it's costing me too much money to come up with this cantilever design, then my option is to underpin the adjoining owner's foundation, as you previously showed there. Or could they potentially cut that foundation away and underpin it? I mean, is that another scenario?
It is feasible. Let's clear away the debris. Now this is depending on the load.
Yeah.
The ground may be strong. The loads may be light on here, and it's sometimes possible that the loads generated by this eccentric foundation may in fact be sufficient for the ground to bear without undue deflection. Right. So sometimes you could actually cut it off a little bit.
So you could cut it, which is a notifiable matter under the
Yes, that's right.
Cut off a foundation which protrudes on the onto the neighbour's land. Yeah.
And leave it with minimal risk of any damage.
But you still would need to underpin this area here as well, would you, in most cases?
If your new foundation is coming down to this level,
yes,
and the ground was sufficiently competent, you wouldn't need to underpin it.
Right.
Technically, though that is frankly not that common.
No.
It is more likely that you would need to underpin it, and you would make your foundations sufficiently wide to limit.
The reason why I suggest this is because you keep the two buildings independent of each other. The two structures aren't joined with a shared foundation like you showed initially. So that often is another alternative solution.
Agreed.
And maybe whether it's more costly or whether it isn't, an assessment has to be made by the building owner's contractor.
Yeah.
But that's useful. Other things I would also flag up is that there's always a potential that there could be an overhang.
Oh,
so if I borrow your pen, so as you extend this upwards, let's say to roof level, and then you've basically got a wall plate there, rafter coming out, whatever, however it is, it could be a flat roof design, whatever it is. If there is an overhang here, that has to be cut back.
And the gutter,
so roof cutters, well, you have situations where, yes, if there is a gutter over here, again, that has to be cut back, and this is another topic. It's less structural matter, but this all needs to be cut back up to the boundary. So this needs to be removed away. So just borrowing your dust, sorry. So that has to be moved back.
Yeah.
You then have to think of this wall goes all the way up, and I'll kind of going to realms on something non-structural. You've got to have some sort of valley in between, or however you do it, a designer has to come up with a solution. So these are sort of considerations that need to also be taken into effect. Yeah. So we consider as part of all surveyors the cutting back of roof overhangs, the weathering and flashing of very, very narrow gaps between the extension walls.
Yes.
Rainwater could pour in here. How is that dealt with? You know,
I
where,
suppose you
where the gap is minimal.
Yes, you need to keep vermin out, I suppose, as well.
You got to keep vermin out, yes, some of that,
All
but
sorts of things.
it's not, you know, but you still could have a gap between two extensions of 100 millimetres.
Yes.
Is it practical to flash over and weather that gap
Yeah.
at the top? It's not always practical to do so.
No, I see.
But, you know, as part of the building operation, one thing I would say is you won't want a lot of mortar snots. As the building owner builds this up, all this mortar collects in here.
Ah, yes, snots and droppings.
And snots and droppings, water comes in here, and then you get a potential bridging. Both sides of water getting in through the extension walls at a low level.
We'll
Yeah.
need to use cavity battens and be very careful with his work.
Very careful with his work when he builds up that wall. It's common in suburban situations, you know, new extension wall being built up to an existing extension wall. So that concludes this presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
This has been a presentation by Arun Associates, Chartered Surveyors and Property Consultants, in conjunction with William J. Marshall and Partners, Structural Engineers and Architects. As the building owner, please be aware that you will need to comply with all statutory regulations, including complying with party wall legislation, building regulation and planning requirements. I hope this presentation has been of value to you, and if you have any further issues regarding your building project, or if you are a neighbour that might be affected by building works which your neighbour is intending to undertake, please do not hesitate to contact us. Thank you.